Hello and thank you for joining me. Today's video is about documents. If the crap hit the fan, can you prove who you are and where you live? Stay with me. As part of our EDC, a lot of us carry a thumb drive. Quite often it's encrypted, and we have copies of important documents, etc. on there to aid us if there's a problem and we need to prove, insurance details, if there's drama, or it might be copies of ID, etc, etc. Now, in normal times, it's a bit risky. And when I say it's a bit risky, you need to realise that most government departments, and it isn't just government departments, it was most corporate organisations have USB ports switched off by their systems administrator. And that's obviously to prevent data loss, but also to prevent infection to networks. So that's worth thinking about. If you are just going to rely on having your documents on a thumb drive, you may not actually be able to get the thumb drive into a government or corporate machine to actually prove or access the data that you require. Same goes for SD cards. Yeah, that's a good alternative to the thumb drive, is to actually have the details on an SD card, because of the size of it is much smaller, so it's easier to carry. Now, not everyone has ID. In the UK, ID cards are not compulsory as of yet, but we have photo driving licences, and obviously there's passports. But the problem is, if you don't drive, so you haven't got a driving licence, and you don't have a passport, what ID have you got? Now, some are going to say, well, it doesn't really matter. Well, it can matter. Take, for instance, you've had to leave your property, so you've had to evacuate for whatever reason, and perhaps it's for an extended period of time, and then you come back to your property and find out somebody else has actually moved into it. How can you prove that you have the right of abode there and not the other person that's in there? I know that's a bit of an extreme example, but I was watching a documentary a few weeks ago about a young family in Ukraine. So Putin and his peckerheads had invaded, and this young couple were leaving their apartment block because it was unsafe to stay there, and they were just going through some of the things that they'd put in their grab bag, if you like. And believe me, their grab bags are nothing like the grab bags that you see on YouTube or that preppers build. And the young lady there, she had a big folder, and it was full of paper documents, and the interviewer said to her, basically, what's all that about? And she said, because there is, unfortunately, some corruption in Ukraine, as there is in probably every country, to be fair, she was concerned that if she vacated, or they vacated their apartment, that when they can return, the superintendent, the person who's in charge of that apartment complex, may have let the room out, or the apartment out, to someone else. So she wanted to make sure that she had, I suppose it's the equivalent of a tenancy agreement, so that she can prove that she had a right to live there, a right of abode. So could that happen in the UK? I don't know, but the potential's there. So don't just rely on important documents to be on thumb drives or SD cards. Yeah, seriously consider taking copies and carrying them. So it might be, for instance, that it would be prudent to have a copy of your tenancy agreement if you rent, a copy of title deeds if you own the property, or just utility bills. And obviously you're going to want insurance documents and details, just in case there's been some structural damage, etc. And the other aspect of it is, and we saw it a little bit during the COVID lockdown, I was fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, that because of what I do, we worked all the way through COVID-19, and we were issued with a letter of authority at the beginning in case there were going to be restrictions on movement, which there wasn't as such. Imagine that you're away from home and there is an incident or a disaster and you're trying to get home. What if there is a restriction on movement, that perhaps there are roadblocks and they're only admitting people that actually live in that residential area? Have you got something to say that you live there? If not, you might have drama, you might get turned away. And I know you can say, well, my vehicle, you know, my car's registered to my home address, so the police can do a PNC check, which is a police national computer check, and they will then know that my vehicle's registered there, or a voter's check that I'm there. But the problem is, what if the networks are down? And I know again you say, oh, that's a bit extreme. Well, 18 years ago, so technology's moved along, but 18 years ago, I can remember more than a few occasions when I was on duty and the PNC was down. So that made it impossible to check people or vehicles against PNC. So the potential is there that that system can go down, and then you're looking at paper documents. It's okay having electronic copies, but as I say, you might not be able to get them onto a system if there's a system running to show people. So just bear that in mind. It's not something that I think is often spoken about, but I think it's very, very valid that you have paper copies of important documents in your bucket bags, and to a certain extent in your get home bags, because you never know what's going to happen. Anyway, short and sweet. If the video's of use, whack us a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and if you've got any comments, please feel free to add them. Have a great Sunday. See you soon.